Hello, welcome back to the breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you are watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. All right, so I've got an update regarding the ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine. We know just a couple days ago, Ukraine had agreed to a 30-day temporary ceasefire with Russia, and this was a proposal that came from the United States. So they agreed with the U.S. just a few days ago in Saudi Arabia. Now we're waiting for Russian President Vladimir Putin to respond to this, and I have an update here for you on your screen. Putin says he agrees to end hostilities with Ukraine, but more dialogue is needed. The Russian leader voiced very preliminary support for the 30-day ceasefire proposal from the United States and Ukraine, but said that a number of questions remained. Okay, so this was a picture coming out from the conference today as he held a press conference with Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus. I let you guys know in our last update that Lukashenko had arrived in Moscow to hold a press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And also, we know that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy from the United States under the Trump administration, is supposed to be in Moscow also. And tonight, he's supposed to be meeting with Vladimir Putin directly behind closed doors, and they're going to discuss this ceasefire deal. So it looks like Putin is open to ending hostilities with Ukraine, but he does have a lot of questions that remain unanswered. So it looks like maybe I think what's going to happen here is Putin is going to come out with a lot of his own demands probably over the next couple days. And we might even see him try to maybe make some amendments to this ceasefire deal, and maybe he won't agree to it all in principle. Maybe there will be some things that he may want changed, but he appears to be making a lot of demands and asking a lot of questions. So not exactly coming out and agreeing with this ceasefire deal 100%, but at least in principle of ending hostilities hostilities between Ukraine and Russia. He is open to stopping the fighting, at least temporarily. We'll see what happens. So let's go ahead and jump into the news. I'm going to show you guys several things here. We'll start off with this mainstream news article. I'll just briefly go over this. We're not going to go over the whole thing, but I have a little bit of information coming out from the conference, and then I also can show you guys a clip of Vladimir Putin speaking today. So this is on ABC News. Putin responds to U.S.-Ukraine ceasefire proposal, says Russia is for it, but has concerns. President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, was in Moscow on Thursday. Okay, this is coming out today, March 13th, 2025. And it says here, in his first public remarks on the proposed 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin said Russia is for it, but he wants his own security guarantees. Putin raised questions regarding a 30-day ceasefire during a press briefing in Moscow on Thursday, as President Donald Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff landed in the city to discuss the proposal. It seems to me it would be very good for the Ukrainian side to reach a truce for at least 30 days, and we are for it, but there is a nuance, Putin said, highlighting concerns regarding Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces pushed into last year in a surprise offensive, but in recent weeks have seen Russian forces retake significant ground. If we stop hostilities for 30 days, what does it mean? Does it mean that everyone who is there will leave without a fight, Putin said? Or the Ukrainian leadership will give them an order to lay down their arms and just surrender? How will it be? It is not clear. Yeah, so obviously the Ukrainians are still holding ground inside the Kursk region. They have lost a significant amount of territory over there, but nonetheless, the Ukrainians are still there. So he does kind of have a point. How will that be worked out? Will the Ukrainians just leave? Will they surrender? What will happen, at least in the Kursk region? Maybe not so much inside of Ukraine. So here's a photo of Vladimir Putin while he was speaking at that conference with President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. It also says here, Putin said he also wants guarantees that during a 30-day ceasefire, Ukraine will not regroup, and he wondered who would determine if there were any violations of a ceasefire. These are all issues that require careful investigation from both sides, he said. Putin suggested Russia should talk with Trump to discuss his concerns, while adding, but the idea itself is to end the conflict with peaceful means. We support it. At the top of his remarks, the president thanked Trump for his attention to Ukraine's settlement. We believe that this ceasefire should lead to a long-term peace and eliminate the initial causes of the crisis. This was something big that he mentioned also, where he says, we believe that this ceasefire should lead to a long-term peace. That's something he has mentioned before, that they don't just want a 30-day ceasefire where Ukraine can basically rearm and prepare to fight again. It's kind of what Ukraine says at the same time towards Russia, I guess, right? But that's something that they've mentioned many times. And also where he says eliminate the initial causes of this crisis. At least one of those things to me could possibly be Ukraine joining NATO. I mean, we've heard recently that Ukraine is not going to be able to join NATO anytime soon. Some people say Ukraine will never be able to join, but we know that Ukraine wants to try to get into NATO at some point down the road, and I don't think Vladimir Putin wants them to get into NATO. Period. So that could be part of the initial causes of the crisis that he's kind of mentioned before. So now we'll jump on over to X and I'll show you guys a few things over here that I have to share with you. So let's hop on over here to Anton Gerashenko. It says, Putin, we agree with the proposals to cease hostilities, but we believe that this cessation must be one that would lead to long-term peace and eliminate the initial causes of the crisis. I think it would be very good for the Ukrainian side to achieve a ceasefire for at least 30 days, and we are for that, but there are nuances. How will these 30 days be used? For continued forced mobilization in Ukraine, for weapons to be supplied there, for newly mobilized units to be trained, or will none of this be done? Then the question arises, how will the issues of control and verification be resolved, and how will we be guaranteed that nothing like this will happen? So the idea of it in itself is correct, and we certainly support it, but there are issues that we need to discuss. Note that he never says Russia intends to stop arming itself or mobilizing people during the proposed 30 days. Thought that was interesting. Yeah, Putin doesn't mention that at all, but he basically says that Ukraine cannot mobilize during this period as well. That's going to be one of their demands most likely. So take a look at this, about a minute and a half long.
Мы согласны с предложениями прекратить боевые действия. Но исходим из того, что это прекращение должно быть таким, которое привело бы к долгосрочному миру и устранило бы первоначальные причины этого кризиса. Мне кажется, для украинской стороны очень хорошо было бы добиться перемирия хотя бы на 30 суток. И мы за. Но есть нюансы. Значит, эти 30 суток будут как использоваться? Для того, чтобы на Украине продолжилась принудительная мобилизация, для того, чтобы туда поставлялось оружие, для того, чтобы мобилизованные вновь подразделения прошли подготовку, или ничего этого не будет делаться, тогда возникает вопрос, как будут решаться вопросы контроля, верификации, и как нам будет гарантировано, что ничего подобного происходить не будет. Поэтому сама по себе идея правильная, и мы, безусловно, ее поддерживаем. Но есть вопросы, которые мы должны обсудить.
Okay, so clearly a lot of talks still need to be held, and we can see that Vladimir Putin has some issues with security guarantees on their end. They want to make sure that they've got their own security guarantees to protect them and make sure that the ceasefire holds. So that was just a statement coming out from Vladimir Putin today, and I've got a few more things I can show you guys. Now from Noah Reports, Trump, we will see if Russia agrees, and if not, it will be a very disappointing moment for the world. We've discussed with Ukraine which territories will be left or lost, as well as other elements of the final deal. A major power plant is part of the talks, and we're discussing the concepts of an agreement. We don't want to waste time if there's no ceasefire, okay? So this is a statement coming out from Trump today, and they are talking a lot about a major power plant. I believe that's the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I think they're going to be deciding whether Russia or Ukraine ends up controlling that in the future. So take a look at this real quick.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia, and we have not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process. But phase one is the ceasefire. A lot of the individual subjects have been discussed, though. We've been discussing concepts of land because you don't want to waste time with the ceasefire if it's not going to mean anything. So we're saying, look, this is what you can get. This is what you can't get. They discussed NATO and being in NATO, and everybody knows what the answer to that is. They've known that answer for 40 years, in all fairness. So a lot of the details of a final agreement have actually been discussed. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
All right, so we can see that the Trump administration and their team is still working with Ukraine to work out the details of this agreement, what type of land they're going to hold, what type of land they're going to lose, whether they're going to get control of potentially the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is what I think he's talking about here. And then, just at the end of the day, it's really up to Russia. Is Russia going to agree to this or are they not? And there's a lot of questions still waiting to be asked here and answered. So I've also got some more information here for you from Max 24. Ukraine presented the U.S. with its red lines for peace talks. No restrictions on the size of their army. No restrictions on Ukraine's participation in the EU and NATO. Russia should not have a veto over Ukraine's participation in international organizations. Okay, so these are very big for Ukraine, and these could be deal breakers potentially for Russia also. I mean, Ukraine saying they don't want any restrictions on the size of their army. I mean, that's big because we've heard Russia come out in the past and say they actually want Ukraine to reduce their army. Ukraine participating in EU and NATO. I mean, NATO is a big one. We know Russia will not allow Ukraine to get into NATO. They've even threatened destroying Ukraine completely if they try to get into NATO or even attacking NATO at some point. So that's a big one also. Russia should not have to veto over Ukraine's participation in international organizations. I mean, that's a big one also. What if they try to get into the EU? I'm not sure if Russia could try to veto that or block them or any other type of international organizations. Definitely some big key points that Ukraine wants in terms of their red lines for these peace talks, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, just wanted to show you that there. Finally, one last thing from the Ukrainian Review. Trump said he has leverage over Putin, but he doesn't want to use it yet. I have leverage, but I don't want to talk about it right now because we're talking to them right now. And judging by his statements today, they were pretty positive, I think. Okay, so we did hear a lot of that also coming out from Trump today, him stating that so far the talks between the U.S. and Russia have been pretty positive. As we know that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy for the Trump administration in Russia, has already headed over to Moscow. So far the talks are looking positive. So we'll see how things go. I think things are going to change very quickly. But I wouldn't be surprised over the next 24 to 48 hours, we hear that Russia has all of a sudden a lot of different demands, and many of these demands maybe they've mentioned before. And I think many of these demands are going to have to get worked out before we see Russia signing any kind of agreement. But I think it's possible maybe there will be a ceasefire in the near future. But you guys let me know what you think. Do you think we're heading down the road to a ceasefire, or do you think these ceasefire talks will collapse? And do you think this war will continue and maybe get much worse? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section, but that's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell, that way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.